Hey guys, Justin Carroll here doing the teacher workshop. Uh, Apologize, it was a little late. I got caught up in South Carolina working, so if anyone needs to have another person to do a reflection with, I'd be more than happy to work with you. Uh, the topic I chose is nutrition. Really passionate about nutrition, both for myself and for our students. I feel nutrition is one of the things that really gets drugged or swept under the rug. Doesn't get as much of the attention as I think it needs to, especially with obviously the obesity rates how they are nowadays. I feel like nutrition is probably the greatest way to combat that, especially in at a young age. I feel like if you set proper nutritional habits from a young age, you're much more likely to carry those on with you to your adult life. The tough part of the nutrition aspect is it's really out of the hands of most students. They're probably not paying for their food. They're probably not able to prepare meals themselves, especially if you've got a student that's part of a sports team or does other stuff or works as a part-time job after school. They most of the time are cramming in junk food or fast food or really whatever they can get their hands on. So it's really a tough battle to attack, and I feel that if we at least educate our students on healthy eating, and the basics of it, they will obviously be better able to combat it. Uh, the first thing in my lesson, or actually, let's get to my objectives. My HBOs were HE3, eat breakfast every day; HE10, prepare foods in healthy ways; and HE11, balance caloric intake with caloric expenditure. And the central focus of my lesson will be ensuring students are able to identify their three macronutrients: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and also their functions. I actually did a survey of 15 high school students, and they were athletes, they were male baseball players, and only one of them was able to identify all three macronutrients and could not name the functions of all three. So these are athletes. They're probably a little more aware of their nutrition and what fuel they should be putting in their bodies. And only 1 out of 15 of those high school age students knew their three macronutrients. So that's a little uh, tough to think about, but we've got to educate them on them. So that was my main deal. So first few minutes of class, obviously not in a class. So I'll plan on doing the same thing, kind of get a little gist of what everyone has baseline knowledge of in terms of uh, the three macronutrients. Again, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So I would have a brief survey, brief maybe discussion, 7-minute discussion, and just kind of find out what they know, what they may think they know. In today's times, there's a lot of fad diets, a lot of, carbohydrates are terrible for you. When really it's not the case. There's a lot of misinformation out there about exactly what is healthy, what you should be putting in your bodies in order to be healthy, perform at an optimal level, and create nutritional habits that will last and create a healthy person both mentally and physically. Uh, so that's how I would kind of start the class, a little shake up, and then the base of my lesson was after that discussion is done, is I would break uh, break into groups. I would assign groups depending on how many students I had. They would either be assigned carbohydrates, fats, or proteins. If there was something like 15 students, then I would probably do uh, 3 groups of 5. If there were 18, I might do 6 groups of 3. But kind of depending on if the numbers fit right, obviously it would go well if the same amount of macronutrients were assigned. and there was the same amount of groups for fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, but probably would have to work around that. I would rather prefer smaller groups, but bigger groups would work okay as well. And I would want to rent out computers if available, but if all the students had their smartphones, the smartphones would suffice. But I would rather be able to rent out computers and hold them for the health class. So the basis of the lesson would be students to research and then report on their given carbohydrate, their functions, what foods are in high supply of those, what are clean sources of these nutrients, and what may not be so clean sources of these nutrients. For example, carbohydrates like Pop-Tarts clearly aren't a great source. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, vegetables, rice, those are pretty solid sources. Same could be said for proteins and fats. There's good sources, there's bad sources, there's somewhere in between. But identifying the false information and the false narrative that might be there in today's society would I would ensure that they are kind of aware of that. And once they split into the groups, I would want them to research these, but it would need to be on it would be required to be on a scholarly website, .gov, .org. Would really want the students to stray away from websites like, for example, bodybuilding.com or some sort of website like that that may have information about fad diets, and ensuring these students understand that those diets, they might work short term, but in the long term, they're somewhat detrimental to health and detrimental to a proper diet. Uh, so once the students were able to research, hopefully should take no longer than 25-30 minutes to be able to produce a product, and the students would present their product to the class. They could use poster board, whatever they see fit to use. I would be more than into it if they wanted just to present orally and read a couple facts and explain what the carbohydrates do, what the fats do, what the proteins do, and name a couple sources of these. That's what I really want, would be not the students to just display information, but being able to speak about the information and be truly knowledgeable about it, not just writing down facts, but being able to explain what they do, the process in the body, and how they react in the body. For an assessment, I would have a rubric for the presentations. I would obviously show the students the rubric beforehand, but ensure that everyone speaks, that everyone is knowledgeable about the content. And hopefully all these presentations wouldn't take too long. We should be able to get it into a 90-minute class after 5-7 minutes of a little pre-talk, and then 25-30 minutes of research. We should have about 30 to 40 minutes for all the presentations to get done. Maybe even a little more, a little less time than that, but I would like to keep the presentations no more than maybe 3 to 5 minutes, especially since some groups would be presenting on the same information. And so once we got done with that, I would like to maybe give a little detail into the next class that we would be partaking in tomorrow, which would be how these macronutrients kind of react with each other. The percentage of calories that should come from these macronutrients, I think 40% should mostly come from carbohydrates, and 30 from protein and fats. Obviously, you've got a little wiggle room there, and I think it's important to explain to the students that there is a little wiggle room there in terms of calories. It doesn't have to be on the dot, but explaining to them that nutrition is not a single day thing, but a week by week and then a year by year thing that is super beneficial for their health. And that's kind of how I would wrap up the lesson, and continue to kind of build upon the 3 macronutrients and their functions. I know this is a really basic sort of level nutrition, but I feel it's one that is probably at the utmost importance of nutrition, especially when I feel they're really not getting taught this at an effective level in their previous schooling, and maybe even in some high schools. Uh, Not many students are aware of all their macronutrients and their functions, and what foods they should be getting the vast supply of these nutrients from. So thanks for watching. I look forward to the feedback. Thank you.